Hello, Holy Rosary 8th graders. It is Wednesday, so I am wearing my spirit wear. I hope you are also wearing your spirit wear at home today, representing Holy Rosary. We left off in chapter 28, in the middle of chapter 28, at a cliffhanger. So they hear something in the woods. Scout and Jem are walking home. She forgot her shoes. It's all dark. Everybody's gone because she was embarrassed because she didn't come out at the pageant when she was supposed to, even though she practiced so much. But her ham debut was a little bit late. So they're walking home, she and Jem. Something is about to happen. So I'm starting on page 349, right about the top of the page. "Be quiet," he said, and I knew he was not joking. The night was still. I could hear his breath coming easily beside me. Occasionally, there was a sudden breeze that hit my bare legs, but it was all that remained of a promised windy night. There was the stillness before a thunderstorm. We listened. "Heard an old dog just then," I said. "It's not that," Jem answered. "I hear it when we're walking along, but when we stop, I don't hear it." "You hear my costume rustling. Aw, it's just Halloween got you." I said it more to convince myself than Jem, for sure enough, as we began walking, I heard what he was talking about, and it was not my costume. "It's just old Cecil," said Jem presently. "He won't get us again. Don't let him think we're hurrying." We slowed to a crawl. I asked Jem how Cecil could follow us in this dark. Looked to me like he'd bump into us from behind. "I can see you, Scout," said Jem. "How? I can't see you." "Your fat streaks are showing. Mrs. Crenshaw painted them with some of that shiny stuff so they'd show up under the footlights. I can see you pretty well, and I expect Cecil can see you well enough to keep his distance." I would show Cecil that we knew he was behind us and we were ready for him. "Cecil Jacobs is a big wet hen!" I yelled suddenly, turning around. We stopped. There was no acknowledgement, save "hen" bouncing off the distant schoolhouse wall. "I'll get him," said Jem. "Hey!" "Hey, hey, hey," answered the schoolhouse wall. It was unlike Cecil to hold out for so long. Once he pulled a joke, he'd repeat it time and time again. We should have been leapt at already. Jem signaled for me to stop again. He said softly, "Scout, can you take that thing off?" "I think so, but I ain't got on anything underneath it." "I've got your dress here. I can't get it on in the dark." "Okay," he said. "Never mind." "Jem, are you afraid?" "No, I think we're almost to the tree now. Few yards from that and we'll be to the road. We can see the streetlight then." Jem was talking in an unhurried, flat, toneless voice. I wondered how long he would try to keep the Cecil myth going. "You reckon we ought to sing, Jem?" "No. Be real quiet again, Scout." We had not increased our pace. Jem knew as well as I that it was difficult to walk fast without stumping a toe, tripping on stones, and other inconveniences, and I was barefooted. Maybe it was the wind rustling the trees. But there wasn't any wind, and there weren't any trees except the big oak. Our company shuffled and dragged his feet, as if wearing heavy shoes. Whoever it was wore thick cotton pants. What I thought were trees rustling was the soft swish of cotton on cotton. Wheek, wheek, with every step. I felt the sand go cold under my feet, and I knew we were near the big oak. Jem pressed my head. We stopped and listened. Shufflefoot had not stopped with us this time. His trousers swished softly and steadily. Then they stopped. He was running towards us with no child's steps. "Run, Scout, run, run!" Jem screamed. I took one giant step and found myself reeling, my arms useless. In the dark, I could not keep my balance. "Jem! Jem, help me! Jem!" Something crushed the chicken wire around me. Metal ripped on metal, and I fell to the ground and rolled as far as I could, floundering to escape my wire prison. From somewhere near came scuffling, kicking sounds, sounds of shoes and flesh scraping dirt and roots. Someone rolled against me, and I felt Jem. He was up like lightning and pulling me with him, but though my head and shoulders were free, I was so entangled we didn't get very far. We were nearly to the road when I felt Jem's hand leave me, felt him jerk backwards to the ground. More scuffling, and there came a dull crunching sound, and Jem screamed. I ran in the direction of Jem's scream and sank into a flabby male stomach. Its owner said, "Ugh!" and tried to catch my arms, but they were tightly pinioned. His stomach was soft, but his arms were like steel. He slowly squeezed the breath out of me. I could not move. Suddenly, he was jerked backwards and flung on the ground, almost carrying me with him. I thought, Jem's up. One's mind works very slowly at times. Stunned, I stood there dumbly. The scuffing noises were dying. Someone wheezed, and the night was still again. Still, but for a man breathing heavily and staggering. I thought he went to the tree and leaned against it. He coughed violently, a sobbing, bone-shaking cough. "Jem?" There was no answer but the man's heavy breathing. "Jem?" Jem didn't answer. The man began moving around as if searching for something. I heard him groan and pull something heavy along the ground. It was slowly coming to me that there were now 4 people under the tree. Atticus? The man was walking heavily and unsteadily toward the road. I went to where I thought he had been and felt frantically along the ground, reaching out with my toes. Presently, I touched someone. Jem? My toes touched trousers, a belt buckle, buttons, something I could not identify, a collar, and a face. A prickly stubble on the face told me it was not Jem's. I smelled stale whiskey. Any guess who that might be? I made my way along in what I thought was the direction of the road. I was not sure because I had been turned around so many times, but I found it and looked down to the streetlight. A man was passing under it. The man was walking with the staccato steps of someone carrying a load far too heavy for him. He was going around the corner. He was carrying Jem. Jem's arm was dangling crazily in front of him. By the time I reached the corner, the man was crossing our front yard. Light from our front door framed Atticus for an instant. He ran down the steps, and together he and the man took Jem inside. I was at the front door when they were going down the hall. Aunt Alexandra was running to meet me. "Call Dr. Reynolds!" Atticus's voice came sharply from Jem's room. "Where's Scout?" "Here she is," Aunt Alexandra called, pulling me along with her to the telephone. She tugged at me anxiously. "I'm all right, Auntie," I said. "You better call." She pulled the receiver from the hook and said, "Eula May, get Dr. Reynolds, quick." "Agnes, is your father home? Oh, God, where is he? Please tell him to come over here as soon as he comes in. Please, it's urgent." There was no need for Aunt Alexandra to identify herself. People in Maycomb knew each other's voices. Atticus came out of Jem's room. The moment Aunt Alexandra broke the connection, Atticus took the receiver from her. He rattled the hook, then said, "Eula May, get me the sheriff, please." Heck, Atticus Finch. Someone's been after my children. Jem's hurt. Between here and the schoolhouse. I can't leave my boy. Run out there for me, please, and see if he's still around. Doubt if you'll find him now, but I'd like to see him if you do. Gotta go now. Thanks, Heck. Atticus, is Jem dead? No, Scout. Look after her, sister, he called as he went down the hall. Aunt Alexandra's fingers trembled as she unwound the crushed fabric and wire from around me. Are you all right, darling? She asked over and over as she worked me free. It was a relief to be out. My arms were beginning to tingle, and they were red with small hexagonal marks. I rubbed them, and they felt better. Auntie, is Jem dead? No, darling, he's unconscious. We won't know how badly he's hurt until Dr. Reynolds gets here. Jean Louise, what happened? I don't know. She left it at that. She brought me something to put on, and had I thought about it then, I would have never let her forget it. In her distraction, Auntie brought me my overalls. Put these on, darling, she said, handing me the garments she most despised. She rushed back to Jem's room, then came to me in the hall. She patted me vaguely and went back to Jem's room. A car stopped in front of the house. I knew Dr. Reynolds' step almost as well as my father's. He had brought Jem and me into the world, had led us through every childhood disease known to man, including the time Jem fell out of the treehouse, and he had never lost our friendship. Dr. Reynolds said if we had been boil-prone, things would have been different, but we doubted it. He came in the door and said, "Good Lord." He walked toward me and said, "You're still standing," and changed his course. He knew every room in the house. He also knew that if I was in bad shape, so was Jem. After 10 forevers, Dr. Reynolds returned. "Is Jem dead?" I asked. "Far from it," he said, squatting down to me. "He's got a bump on the head just like yours, and a broken arm. Scout, look that way. No, don't turn your head, roll your eyes. Now look over yonder. He's got a bad break. So far as I can tell now, it's in the elbow. Like somebody tried to wring his arm off. Now look at me." "Then he's not dead?" "No!" Dr. Reynolds got to his feet. "We can't do much tonight," he said, "except try to make him as comfortable as we can. We'll have to x-ray his arm. Looks like he'll be wearing his arm way out by his side for a while. Don't worry, though. He'll be good as new. Boys his age bounce." While he was talking, Dr. Reynolds had been looking keenly at me, lightly fingering the bump that was coming up on my forehead. "You don't feel broke anywhere, do you?" Dr. Reynolds' small joke made me smile. "Then you don't think he's dead, then?" He put on his hat. "Now, I may be wrong, of course, but I think he's very alive. Shows all the symptoms of it. Go have a look at him, and when I come back, we'll get together and decide." Dr. Reynolds' step was young and brisk. Mr. Heck Tate's was not. His heavy boots punished the porch, and he opened the door awkwardly. But he said the same thing Dr. Reynolds said when he came in. "You all right, Scout?" he added. "Yes, sir. I'm going in to see Jem. Atticus and them's in there." "I'll go with you," said Mr. Tate. Aunt Alexandra had shaded Jem's reading light with a towel, and his room was dim. Jem was lying on his back. There was an ugly mark along one side of his face. His left arm lay out from his body. His elbow was bent slightly, but in the wrong direction. Jem was frowning. "Jem?" Atticus spoke. "He can't hear you, Scout. He's out like a light. He was coming around, but Dr. Reynolds put him out again." "Yes, sir." I retreated. Jem's room was large and square. Aunt Alexandra was sitting in a rocking chair by the fireplace. The man who brought Jem in was standing in a corner, leaning against the wall. He was some countryman I did not know. He had probably been at the pageant and was in the vicinity when it happened. He must have heard our screams and came running. Atticus was standing by Jem's bed. Mr. Heck Tate stood in the doorway. His hat was in his hand, and a flashlight bulged from his pants pockets. He was in his working clothes. "Come in, Heck," said Atticus. "Did you find anything? I can't conceive of anyone low down enough to do a thing like this, but I hope you found him." Mr. Tate sniffed. He glanced sharply at the man in the corner, nodded to him, then looked around the room, at Jem, at Alexandra, then at Atticus. "Sit down, Mr. Finch," he said pleasantly. Atticus said, "Let's all sit down. Have that chair, Heck. I'll get another one from the living room." Mr. Tate sat in Jem's desk chair. He waited until Atticus returned and settled himself. I wondered why Atticus had not brought a chair for the man in the corner. But Atticus knew the ways of country people far better than I. Some of his rural clients would park their long-eared steeds under the chinaberry trees in the backyard, and Atticus would often keep appointments on the back steps. This one was probably more comfortable where he was. "Mr. Finch," said Mr. Tate, "tell you what I found. I found a little girl's dress. It's out there in my car." "That your dress, Scout?" "Yes, sir, if it's a pink one with smocking," I said. Mr. Tate was behaving as if he were on the witness stand. He liked to tell things his own way, untrammeled by the state or defense, and sometimes it took him a while. "I found some funny-looking pieces of muddy-colored cloth." "That's my costume, Mr. Tate." Mr. Tate ran his hands down his thighs. He rubbed his left arm and investigated Jem's mantelpiece. Then he seemed to be interested in the fireplace. His fingers sought his long nose. "What is it, Heck?" said Atticus. Mr. Tate found his neck and rubbed it. "Bob Yule's lying on the ground under that tree down yonder with a kitchen knife stuck up under his ribs. He's dead, Mr. Finch." Who done it?